Hey guys, tonight we're going back, way back to ancient Egypt. You're not in the bustling market streets of Cairo or under the stone shadows of the pyramids. No, tonight you wake up somewhere quieter. The sun is just peeking over the reeds by the Nile, gold and soft, like melted honey across the water. The air smells like wet clay and crushed papyrus. You're lying on a woven mat just outside a humble mud brick home, the kind with a palm frond roof and a sleepy goose watching you from the corner. A goat bleats. Distant birds cackle. A donkey sneezes. But something softer catches your eye. Two dainty hooves, barely making a sound as they step closer. A young gazelle, eyes wide like polished obsidian, nose twitching curiously. It blinks at you as if to say, well, aren't you the slow one today? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and what time it is where you're listening. I love seeing where these sleepy journeys reach. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You rub your eyes, push yourself upright, and take in the scene. Rows of papyrus, clumps of yellow grass, and the glimmering Nile in the distance. Your village is one of the many quiet hubs along the river, the kind not marked on maps, where people don't build pyramids, they build lives. And your life is about to get a little weirder, because that tiny gazelle staring at you, it's yours now. No one really explained why. You just remember your aunt laughing, the neighbors clapping, and your father muttering something about the signs being right. And now here it is, prancing in your yard like it pays rent. At first, it seems like an odd thing to own. Sure, dogs are for protection, cats for pest control. But a gazelle? It doesn't bark, fetch, or scare off intruders. It mostly tiptoes, chews weeds, and stares majestically into the middle distance like it's posing for a temple wall. You name it Tepi, meaning first or beginning, and Tepi is in every way a handful. It refuses to stay tethered unless you bribe it with dates. It nibbles your laundry, and it once drank half a bowl of fig beer and pranced into the neighbor's grain basket. That was a conversation, but everyone seems delighted you have it. They say it brings blessings, especially for someone your age. You'll never starve, says an old farmer, patting the gazelle's sleek back. They find food where gods wouldn't look, which feels a bit exaggerated, but still, nice sentiment. You start noticing things. The way Tepi kneels to rest its legs like a courtly scribe. The way it flicks its tail when you tell a story, as if judging your pacing. You swear it sighs when you burn the lentils. And every time you sit by the fire, it leans against you just enough to share your warmth without fully committing. Emotionally distant, like a cat in deer form. Gazelles weren't just common animals in ancient Egypt. They were wild but invitingly wild. Beautiful, delicate, hard to catch, but tame enough to walk beside you if they trusted you. Kind of like dreams. There's evidence. Fragments of murals, scratched names on pottery, that villagers and elites alike kept gazelles not just as pets, but as companions. You'll hear about palace gardens and temple rituals later, but here, in this sunrise-slow world of farmers and reed pickers, it's a quiet thing. Your mother feeds it chopped lettuce. Your little brother wraps flowers around its horns and calls it moon cow. And when your neighbor's toddler sneezes, Tepi flinches like it's dodging a curse point. One morning, you wake to find it sleeping beside you, head tucked under its flank, legs folded neatly, breath soft as breeze. You resist the urge to pet it, afraid to break the spell. Historians still debate whether common folk really domesticated gazelles or just temporarily raised them before sacrifice. But if you're here living it, it feels like neither. You're not training this creature. You're learning to live with it. And there's something soothing about that. In a world of unpredictable floods, capricious kings, and crocodiles who honestly don't get enough bad press, Tepi is simple. She wants sunlight, soft bedding, and exactly 4 berries. No more, no fewer. It's not always easy. One afternoon, Tepi leaps into the neighbor's fish pond. Another day, she eats a scroll someone left drying in the sun. You try to scold her, but she just blinks with those giant philosophical eyes, and you forget your point. Still, there's a quiet joy in walking beside her along the Nile at dusk. The world hums with crickets and distant flute music. Tepi steps carefully, her hooves barely touching the earth, like she's afraid to wake it. You begin to understand why people once carved gazelles into the walls of tombs. Not because they were useful, but because they were beautiful reminders that peace isn't always loud. One of the elders calls her Shisepai, meaning delight of the heart. He says it like a benediction. And as the day fades into indigo, with the Nile whispering beside you and your sleepy pet nuzzling your sleeve, you wonder if maybe, just maybe, this was the god's idea of a lullaby. The next morning, you're awoken not by the sun or the sound of your family starting their day, but by a moist nose pressing against your cheek. Tepi. Again. Apparently, she's decided that your face is now her favorite alarm clock. You sigh, roll over, and she daintily steps on your foot. Twice, you eventually sit up, rubbing sleep from your eyes as you realize the village's chatter has already begun outside. Someone's arguing about bread prices, and someone else is loudly praising RA for curing their toothache. The usual. But all you can focus on is the reality that you now live with a creature that embodies both elegance and complete chaos. Word's gotten around. People have started visiting, not to see you really, but to catch a glimpse of the young one with the pet gazelle. You start noticing more eyes lingering when you take her out for a walk. You catch people whispering. Children giggle when she flicks her tail or leaps in those tiny, dramatic hops. Someone even asked to borrow her for a wedding. You declined. You're not sure she has the temperament for ceremonial duties. She once ran from a cucumber. It turns out, you're not the only one with such a companion. One afternoon, you spot a young scribe, a city boy, judging by his sandals, leading a well-groomed gazelle along the canal road. He nods at you. His gazelle wears a ribbon. Yours has a burr stuck in her ear. You don't talk. You hear stories about nobles keeping whole menageries in their private gardens. High-walled courtyards filled with birds, monkeys, and, yes, gazelles. But not the dusty, scrappy kind like Tepi. No, their gazelles are perfumed, beaded, sometimes even painted for special occasions. They symbolize grace, wealth, even divine favor. If you can afford to feed a gazelle just for the aesthetic, you're clearly doing all right. In the city of Akhetaten, they say Queen Nefertiti herself kept several gazelles in the palace gardens. Their movements were considered art. Their presence a form of living luxury. And in some tomb paintings, you can even spot them lounging at the feet of royalty. Less pet, more ambient decoration. Like a very twitchy statue. One nobleman, a certain Reckmeyer, supposedly had a pet gazelle named Neferu, meaning beautiful one. It wore a gold collar, was fed figs daily, and had a dedicated servant just to clean its bedding. You'd try not to be jealous, but then Tepi sneezes and wipes her nose on your tunic. Despite the different treatment, there's a thread that connects them all. Whether in a palace or a reed-roof hut, the gazelle is never just a dumb animal. She's poetry on four legs. She's status, sure, but also mystery. There's something about the way her ears twitch, always aware, always cautious, that makes you feel like she knows something you don't. Probably where the snacks are hidden. You learn that in ancient Egyptian art, gazelles are often drawn with exaggerated beauty. Long lashes, slender necks, perfect posture. You start to suspect that your own Tepi knows this. She poses too well for someone not being paid. One day, your village hosts a festival. Nothing huge, just some music, dancing, and a lot of lentil stew. You dress Tepi in your finest spare linen sash, though she chews off one end before noon. Kids laugh as she struts past, tail high, as if she owns the square. You feel a strange pride, not because she's particularly helpful. She isn't, but because she brings joy, laughter, tension. You realize she's become your co-star in the sleepy, slow play of your daily life. Some say gazelles were seen as sacred gifts from the desert gods, that they wandered into human life on purpose, not by accident. A sign, a message. You're not sure you buy that. Tepi once ate part of your sandal. Doesn't seem very divine. Still, there's something undeniably calming about watching her graze at dusk. The rest of the world blurs, but she stays centered, chewing, blinking, living with full, unhurried presence. If that's not holy, what is? And of course, not everyone understands. A traveling merchant sneers when he sees her following you. Better off with a goat, he says. At least you can milk that. You just smile, because clearly, he's never been leaned on by a sleepy gazelle after a long walk. Pity. Historians still argue whether gazelles were truly pets in the way we think of them now, companions, family, emotional support animals. Or were they more symbolic, kept briefly for show, ritual, or trade? The lines blur. Records are fragmented. And much like Tepe's attention span, history refuses to sit still long enough to explain itself. But you don't need a papyrus scroll to tell you what you already know in your bones. When you walk with her, you walk slower. You breathe deeper. You feel time stretch, like the Nile during flood season, soft, wide, and endless, so you keep walking. Through dusty lanes and sun-drenched fields, past curious neighbors and indifferent goats. Tepe flicks her tail, snorts, and trots ahead, pretending not to notice you smiling after her. The next few days pass in that unhurried, sun-warmed rhythm your village seems to have perfected. You wake with the light, you fall asleep to the lull of frogs and flute music, and in between, you mostly try to stop Tepe from eating things that aren't food. Clay pots, reed sandals, the edge of your cousin's scroll. You begin to notice how your gazelle changes your walks through town. People smile more. They wave. Children run up to offer her bits of dried fig or pieces of onion, which she accepts with the solemnity of a priest taking an offering. You start walking her by the river more often, not just for her, but because you've realized something quietly wonderful. People calm down around a gazelle. Voices lower, movements slow. It's like she brings a natural pause to everything. A walking exhale point. One morning, a man in fine linen approaches. His sandals are polished, his beard trimmed into a perfect little triangle, and he smells vaguely of sandalwood and wealth. The governor's wife, he says, wishes to see your gazelle. You're not sure what the correct response is, but, okay. Seems to do the trick. You find yourself walking behind the man, leading Tepe through winding stone streets, past courtyards shaded by fig trees and fountains so clean you feel guilty just breathing near them. Eventually, you arrive at the governor's estate, a sprawling compound with painted columns and guards who look very bored. The governor's wife is lounging beneath a canopy, fanning herself slowly. When she sees Tepe, her eyes light up. She's exquisite, she murmurs, so poised. Tepe chooses that moment to yawn directly in her direction and scratch her ear with one delicate hoof. You brace for offense, but the lady laughs. Such confidence! You learn that gazelles are all the rage in upper-class gardens. Not as beasts of burden or livestock, but as status animals like lapdogs with longer legs. A noblewoman with a gazelle isn't just rich. She's fashionable. She's spiritually connected. She's the kind of person who walks through the world with a delicate hoofprint. You spend the afternoon watching servants try to tempt Tepe with honey-dipped oats and slices of cucumber artfully arranged like lotus petals. She ignores all of it and starts licking a decorative stone frog. The governor's wife is delighted. She's discerning, she whispers. Eventually, you're sent home with a small sack of dates, a length of embroidered cloth, and the odd feeling that Tepe might soon get invited to more parties than you do. Later that week, you catch wind of something even more surreal. Temple keepers keeping gazelles inside sacred grounds. Not penned, not tethered, but living among the altars and incense burners. You're skeptical. Temples are for gods and priests, not wildlife. But you're also curious. So you wander up the hill to the nearest temple, one devoted to Hathor, goddess of love, music, and the occasional dramatic eyeliner. The priest at the gate eyes you warily but softens when he sees Tepe. Ah, he says, smiling. A sister. You're not quite sure what that means, but you're waved inside. Inside, the temple is cool and shadowy. The air smells of myrrh and roasted barley. And yes, there she is, another gazelle, smaller than Tepe, wearing a beaded collar that probably cost more than your house. She's lounging near the base of a painted column, half asleep, half listening to a nearby harpist practicing what can only be described as divine elevator music. You're told that in some temples, gazelles are seen as sacred animals, living symbols of purity, grace, and fertility. Some believe they carry the spirit of certain goddesses. Others say they simply bring calm. Either way, they're treated with reverence. A priestess leans close and tells you the story of a gazelle who once led worshippers to a hidden spring during a drought. Another insists that a temple's sacred flame stayed lit for 7 nights because a gazelle refused to sleep beside it. Are these tales true? Who knows? But they're whispered with the kind of awe that makes truth beside the point. Historians still debate the legitimacy of these temple gazelle stories. Some claim the animals were more symbolic, painted, sculpted, maybe sacrificed, but not kept like pets. Others insist the physical remains, buried near altars, suggest a deeper connection. Evidence is scarce. Arguments are plenty. But you've seen it now. A gazelle reclining like royalty beside the incense, blinking slowly as though dreaming of lotus flowers and spiritual enlightenment. And Tepi? She's sniffing a bowl of oil and knocking over a ceremonial fan. Divine. Indeed, on your way home, a child runs up and asks, "Is she magic?" You think about it. The way she's changed your life. The way people look at her. The stories, the smiles, the quiet. You nod. A little. That evening, your uncle, who rarely speaks unless the fish stew is oversalted, leans over during dinner and says, "You know, they used to tether gazelles in temples." Then he returns to slurping his lentils like nothing happened. You pause mid-bite. Tethered. He nods slowly. With silk cords, sometimes. Or palm fiber ropes. Not to trap them. Just to keep them from wandering too close to the sacrificial fire. That night, with Tepi curled up by your feet, you think about that image. A gazelle, calm and alert, watching incense rise in golden swirls, its leash barely visible, more ornamental than functional. You wonder if it felt chosen or contained. The next day, curiosity gets the better of you. You walk back toward the temple. Not the Grand Hathor temple this time, but a smaller, older one, dedicated to Sadat, guardian of the Nile's flood. It's less polished, more worn, with stones that look like they've been there since before the gods had names. You hover outside until a weathered priest finally motions you in with a flick of his fingers. "Quiet feet," he murmurs. Inside, the chamber is simple. Cool shadows, baskets of grain, 2 sleepy cats, and yes, there, near the back, a tethered gazelle. Unlike the palace pets or the pampered courtyard ones, this gazelle looks serious. Not in a solemn way, but in the way a storm cloud looks like it has important business. A braided rope loops gently around its neck, tied to a carved stone ring in the wall. It doesn't pull, doesn't fuss, just stands perfectly still, ears flicking with every whisper and sandal scuff. A priestess approaches you, voice softer than cotton. We believe they anchor the divine, not as messengers, more like mood setters. You glance at Tepi, who's currently licking ancient sandstone like it's a frozen treat. Divine vibes indeed. She explains that certain rituals require presence. Not just human devotion, but animal calm. Gazelles were chosen because of their stillness, their poise, their ability to just be. In a chaotic world of floods, famine, and politics, a gazelle was peace made flesh. You help prepare for an evening rite. Not a flashy one, just a quiet offering to encourage steady waters in the coming season. The priestess knots a garland of dried lotus petals and gently places it around the temple gazelle's neck. Then she lights 3 small oil lamps and steps back. The air is thick with scent and silence. The gazelle does nothing, doesn't blink, doesn't twitch. It simply exists, utterly, completely present. You understand, for the first time, that reverence isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a creature not moving when everything else begs to. Back outside, a young apprentice ties a matching garland around Tepi. She sneezes immediately and tries to eat it, still a work in progress. Over the next few weeks, you begin to see gazelles differently. Not just yours, not just the temple ones, but all of them. You spot them etched on tomb walls, always elegant, always deliberate. You notice how they appear near gods, beside offerings, or sometimes simply standing in tall reeds like they're guarding the boundary between the sacred and the everyday. You hear of gazelles being tethered during festivals, not for control, but for presence. Like living statues, You hear of songs sung in their honor, with lyrics about the soft-hoofed ones who walk without sound. There's one particularly strange story. A prince who swore his pet gazelle could predict omens. Before a battle, he'd present it with different leaves. Whichever one it chewed first determined his strategy. He won twice, lost once. Historians still argue whether the gazelle had a gift or just really liked mint. And here's a fringe fact for you. Some believe gazelles could detect dishonesty. If you spoke falsehoods near one, it would stamp its foot or turn away. You try it with Tepi. You tell her you're going to share your figs. She stares at you. You do not share your figs. She kicks over your water bowl. Fair. You learn how to make your own tether, not a leash, really more like a soft loop from braided flax. You don't use it to restrain Tepi, only to include her. During a river ceremony, while people chant and cast herbs into the Nile, you gently tie her to a stake near your family's mat. She stays, watches, doesn't move. It feels symbolic. Maybe she understands. Maybe she's just digesting breakfast. Still, it's something. Historians have differing views about these tethers. Some see them as purely practical, meant to prevent chaos in sacred spaces. Others think they were ceremonial, more spiritual ornament than restraint. The ropes were often decorative, dyed or adorned, so maybe they were for show, or maybe for connection, a soft thread between world and wonder. You begin using the term tethered grace in your head whenever you see her sitting still in the sunset. There's power in stillness, and sometimes beauty needs a soft anchor. The desert stretches before you like a sleeping lion, silent, immense, and glittering with heat. You're on the edge of town now, past the last irrigation ditches, where the green starts to fade into ochre. Tepi walks ahead, unhurried, hooves barely kicking up the sand. Her body moves with a natural grace that makes you feel like a sack of potatoes by comparison. You're accompanying your cousin, who's visiting a band of desert herders for trade, goat cheese, salt, dates. You mostly tagged along because someone said the herders keep wild gazelles. Not in cages, not as pets, but as companions of a different kind. You spot them from a distance. Small figures in loose robes and headscarves, their camp outlined by a few low tents and lines of drying fish. And near the edge of it all, almost blending into the sand, a group of gazelles. No leashes, no fences, just hanging out. When you arrive, one of the herders, an older woman with sun-cracked skin and hands like woven rope, nods at Tepi. She's soft, she says in a tone that might be a compliment. Not like ours. You spend the afternoon watching how they move together. The gazelles don't follow commands. They don't fetch or kneel or jump on cue, but they stay close. They graze in loose circles around the camp. They lean into the wind the same way the herders do, as if instinctively synced. One man explains it over flatbread. They come to us when they choose. We don't raise them. We just don't stop them. You glance at Tepi, who's currently licking the side of a water jar like it owes her money. She has no such reservations about choosing people. These desert-dwelling people don't name their gazelles, not because they don't care, but because names, they believe, create obligation. If you name something, you own its fate. If you let it remain wild, it can stay a guest in your world, not a prisoner. Still, the bond is unmistakable. You watch a herder whistle softly, and one of the gazelles trots over, nuzzles his elbow, then walks off again like it just wanted to confirm he still existed. That, somehow, feels deeper than ownership. You hear stories around the fire that night. One woman tells of a gazelle that walked beside her for 3 years, then vanished during a sandstorm. She still leaves dates outside her tent sometimes, just in case. Another man claims he was saved by a gazelle who stomped on a snake coiled near his leg, though he admits the snake might have just died from laughter at his screaming. There's even a tale about a pair of gazelles who led lost travelers to water. Whether myth or memory, it's told with reverence. Historians still puzzle over these semi-wild relationships. Were gazelles truly part of herder society? Or were they tolerated intrusions, temporary neighbors from the dunes? Some argue it was all spiritual projection, a longing for grace in a harsh world. Others insist the bond was real, documented in oral traditions and passed through generations. But there's no papyrus here, no mural. Just sand, and silence, and hoofprints. And still, these herders seem deeply connected to the animals. They speak to them softly, as though offering suggestions rather than orders. They share their shade. They let the gazelles drink first. You try it. You fill a clay bowl and hold it steady. Tepi sniffs, side-eyes the bowl, and proceeds to drink directly from your cupped palms instead. Classic. As the sun sets behind the rocky horizon, you sit on a dune with a bowl of date paste and sesame. The gazelles are silhouettes now, blending into the darkening sands. One stands near your shoulder, motionless, like a guardian spirit. You wonder what it would be like to live like this, unhurried, unbound, moving by choice rather than direction. You think of your village's schedules, your temple rituals, the tethered calm of sacred animals, and you realize this is a different kind of grace. Untamed, but no less profound. Before you leave, the old herder presses a dried flower into your hand. From her grazing spot, she says, nodding at a pale gazelle nearby. If she gives you her attention, that's a kind of blessing. You say goodbye with a small bow. Not to the people, to the gazelles. Back home, Tepi seems more regal than before, more mysterious. You're not sure what shifted, but something has. She walks differently, or maybe you watch differently. Either way, you understand now, some companions aren't owned, just welcomed. You wake in the middle of the night to the sound of a thump. Not loud, just a soft whump, like someone dropped a pillow from waist height. You blink against the dark and sit up. Tepi is standing in the corner, staring at your oil lamp as if it whispered something offensive. You're not sure what woke her, or you, but something in the air feels off. Not dangerous, just unsettled. A little too quiet, like the world is holding its breath. The next morning, you find your mother burning incense and muttering prayers at the household altar. A bad omen in the stars, she says when she catches your eye. Keep your gazelle close today. You don't argue. That afternoon, you visit the temple again, mostly because Tepi's getting twitchy and you need an excuse to stretch your legs. Inside, a priest is mid-chant, and a circle of worshippers hums along, eyes half closed. Tepi stands at your side, unusually still. You find yourself watching her more than the ritual. Her eyes track the flames. Her ears twitch with each chime of the bell. You realize you're not the only one watching. A young priestess, not much older than you, is sketching something in charcoal on a scrap of bark paper. She's the perfect model, she whispers, when she sees you looking. So, between things, you nod, though you're not sure what she means. Later, she explains, gazelles are sacred because they aren't one thing or the other. Not fully wild, not fully tame. Not cow, not lion. They're between. That's where gods dwell, in the in-between. That idea stays with you. You begin noticing just how many Egyptian deities have blended forms. Falcon-headed Horus, jackal-headed Anubis, lion-bodied Sekhmet. So it makes sense, in a dreamy, moonlit way, that gods might also borrow from the elegance of a gazelle. In fact, you later learn that some scholars believe the goddess Sadet, whom you met through her slightly crumbly temple, was once depicted with gazelle horns. Others suggest she was merged with antelope deities from Nubian beliefs. The gods of water and fertility seem to like soft hooves and long lashes. And it's not just Sadet. Mentions of gazelles show up in hymns to Hathor, Isis, and even in fragments of desert mythology now mostly forgotten. A fragment of papyrus found near Aswan speaks of a sky runner with almond eyes who could cross worlds without stirring the dust. That sounds suspiciously like a poetic way to describe your snack-thieving roommate. There's a story one of the priests tells you. Low voice, incense swirling between syllables. About a divine gazelle who once led a lost priestess across the desert. Not by speaking, not by changing the sand or moving the stars. Just by walking in a straight line, never looking back, until they reached the temple of shelter. The priestess wept. The gazelle vanished. Historians still argue whether gazelles were directly tied to deity worship, or just associated with traits like femininity, fertility, and grace. There's little agreement. Papyrus doesn't always translate perfectly. and gods, as usual, refuse to clarify. Still, the evidence is there, scattered like grains of barley across centuries. Decorative amulets shaped like gazelles. Beads engraved with four-legged figures. Burial murals showing gazelles lounging beside the blessed dead. You start to see Tepi differently. Not as a divine messenger, not exactly, but as something with presence. A living echo of something larger. The way she stands still in the doorway and lets the breeze lift her fur. The way her ears flick when someone lies. The way children fall silent when she enters a room. That evening, you light a small candle near your mat. You place one of her shed hoof wrappings beside it. Not as an altar, just as a thank you. She sniffs it, sneezes, and walks away. Of course. Later, you find her curled in a shaft of moonlight, so perfectly posed it looks deliberate. Her head rests on her folded legs, and for just a moment, you swear she glows a little. You settle beside her, not touching, not speaking, just breathing the same night air. You feel the heaviness of your limbs begin to melt. Your thoughts drift like reeds on the river. And as your eyelids lower, you hear one final whisper from the priestess's earlier sketch. To walk beside a gazelle is to walk in the presence of balance. And balance is sleep. You wake to the scent of fresh date cakes and the soft jingling of beads. It's festival day, and your village is already humming with that peculiar blend of anticipation and last-minute panic. Children run past half-dressed, women shout over cooking pots, and somewhere a flute is playing the same 3 notes on loop. Tepi? She's sitting by the door, looking distinctly unimpressed. You were told to bring her to the central square before noon. She's part of the procession, said the head elder, who has clearly mistaken your slightly feral companion for a trained ceremonial animal. You try explaining that Tepi once fled from a palm leaf, but the elder just waved his hand and told you to make her look nice. So you do what anyone would do in your position. You panic. First, you bathe her, which is generous phrasing for gently toss water in her direction while she hops indignantly over your mat. Then you comb her fur with a stiff brush. She tolerates this with the resigned air of someone reviewing a bad restaurant. When she sneezes directly into your mouth, you know she's had enough. The real challenge. The outfit. You were given a ceremonial collar, soft linen lined with turquoise beads and cowrie shells. Supposedly, it was made for temple animals. You hold it up to Tepi. She stares at it. You imagine her thinking, try it, and I will chew your sandals in alphabetical order. Eventually, with some strategic bribery, figs, you manage to slip it over her head. It actually suits her, regal, colorful, absurd. She looks like a gazelle impersonating royalty. Or perhaps a royal impersonating a gazelle. Hard to say. The square is packed when you arrive. Baskets of fruit, clay jars of beer, dancing girls, and enough incense to smoke out half the desert. Tepi walks calmly beside you, which is new. You suspect she's overwhelmed. Or plotting. People step aside to let you through. Some reach out to touch her gently, murmuring blessings under their breath. May your fields be fertile. May your dreams stay steady. May your goat not eat your laundry. Standard village well wishes. She's the only gazelle in the procession, and that makes her special. Revered. Some even bow slightly as she passes. You pretend not to notice. She definitely does. You reach the front of the crowd where a large platform has been set up. Musicians play a soft rhythm, and a priest steps forward holding a carved statuette of Satyr, antelope-horned and serene. He begins a slow chant, something about balance, fertility, and the gentle guardians of water and grace. Then he gestures toward Tepi. You freeze. This wasn't in the plan. Apparently, she's supposed to walk across the platform, pause beside the statue, and then return to your side. A symbolic gesture of harmony between the village and the Nile. Grace in motion, poise under the eyes of the gods. You nudge her forward. She takes 2 steps, sniffs the air, and poops on the edge of the stage. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Somewhere, a child starts giggling. A priest coughs awkwardly. You are mortified. Then someone claps. Then another. And soon, the entire square is applauding, laughing softly, not mockingly. It's gentle, forgiving, human, the kind of laugh people need when the world takes itself too seriously. A priestess nearby leans over and whispers. She's reminding us the gods have a sense of humor. Historians still debate the role of animals in festivals, whether they were truly revered participants or decorative additions to impress the crowd. Some say certain animals, like cats and ibises, were carefully selected and trained. Others suggest spontaneity was part of the magic. If a gazelle danced, ran, or misbehaved, that too was a sign. Interpreted generously, of course, you like that theory. Later, after the music has quieted and the crowd has thinned, you sit with Tepi by a fountain. You offer her a piece of honeyed bread. She refuses, then steals yours. A young girl approaches, holding a tiny necklace made of string and one blue bead. For her, she says shyly. You tie it gently around Tepi's neck, just above the ceremonial collar. She tilts her head as if weighing its symbolism, or maybe just planning how to eat it stays on. And in that moment, sun setting, festival fading, laughter still echoing faintly in the alleys, you realize something strange. You're proud, not of yourself, of her. This scruffy, opinionated, snack-obsessed creature has become something more than a pet. She's a symbol, a story, a mood. She's your co-conspirator in making this strange, ancient world a little softer around the edges. The next morning is strangely quiet. No flutes, no festivals. Just the sound of doves cooing in the thatched eaves and the faint rustle of a neighbor sweeping sand from sand. Tepi is sprawled across your mat, all legs and serenity. The tiny necklace still tied snugly against her collar. You stretch, shuffle outside, and find your grandfather seated on a low stool, hunched over a crumbling scroll. His eyes squint without truly seeing, lips moving slowly, reciting something under his breath. When he notices you, he pats the ground beside him. Did you know, he says, that gazelles once had names recorded in royal documents? You raise an eyebrow. Proper names, he insists, like pets, or guests, or minor nobles with extra knees. He gestures to the scroll. It's old, fragile, ink bleeding into rough papyrus. You make out a few glyphs, simple ones, symbols for grace, quickness, and beloved. One name jumps out, Yui, supposedly a royal pet, or at least someone's favorite. There's something fascinating about it. That thousands of years ago, someone cared enough to give a gazelle a name and write it down. In ink, in script, in a language meant for tomb walls and coronations. You spend the afternoon poring over scroll fragments, most of which are full of mundane scribbles. Tax records, shipment lists, complaints about fish. But tucked between the numbers and rants are moments that make your heart skip. A short note from a palace steward. The young one with the soft eyes was restless today. She refused melon. Perhaps the heat. A scratched poem in a stable log. Small hooves at dawn, where the temple light bleeds, she waits, like balance. It hits you. Gazelles weren't just decoration. They were noticed, watched, remembered. And not just in royal gardens or dusty villages, but in writing, that most human of efforts to stop time. Tepi, meanwhile, has discovered how to open the lid of the grain jar. You hear a loud thunk, then silence, then the guilty sound of chewing. Later, you visit the scribe's house, a sun-drenched room near the temple. He's a fast talker, dusty fingers, ink-stained elbows. He shows you a collection of dream records, yes, dreams, as in things people saw while asleep, diligently recorded as divine omens. And in more than one, a gazelle appears. I saw the sky run. Her eyes were fire. She left no tracks. A pale gazelle drank from a broken bowl. Then the flood stopped. Interpretations vary. Some believe gazelles represent fleeting opportunity. Others say they symbolize purity or the soul walking between lives. One theory you find delightfully absurd. If you dream of a gazelle who sneezes, you will soon be gifted fish. You read it aloud. Tepi sneezes. You get no fish. Historians still argue about the role of animals in the Egyptian dreamscape. Were these images symbolic or literal sightings woven into visions? Did people believe gazelles were spirit messengers? or just memorable props in the theater of sleep? The scribes aren't sure, but they wrote them down, and that alone feels sacred. Back at home, your neighbor's child asks if Tepi has a secret name. You pause. Maybe she does. Not one you gave her. One she arrived with. You try saying Yui. She blinks slowly. Licks your knee. Close enough. You begin keeping your own scroll. Just a small one. Daily notes. Tepi kicked over the water bowl. Tepi refused grapes. Accepted mint leaves. Tepi stared at the moon for a full hour. You're not a priest. Not a scholar. But in your own messy handwriting, you're doing what scribes did. Turning a creature's quiet life into story, into memory, into meaning. And maybe that's enough. That evening, you read aloud to her from your growing scroll. She lays beside you, eyes half-lidded, chewing idly on her own shadow. When you say her name, Tepi, her ear twitches. You decide to record that too. By now, Tepi has fully integrated into village life. Not quite like a dog that follows commands, and definitely not like a cat that ignores you. More like an elderly aunt who drifts into rooms uninvited, eats your fruit, and then silently judges your posture. She moves through your world like she owns a deed to the land and everyone's just visiting. But owning, or rather, cohabiting with, a gazelle also comes with practical questions. Like, what do you feed a creature whose digestive decisions seem ruled entirely by chaos? You've learned, through trial and uncomfortable error, that she can't eat raw garlic, despite her apparent enthusiasm. Barley is fine in small amounts. Dates must be rationed or she'll get the hiccups. Yes, it's adorable, and lentils make her sneeze aggressively. But her favorite, hands down, mint leaves. The moment she smells them, she becomes the Nile's most determined forager. You discover that some households in the capital even grew mini-gardens solely for their animals. Herbs for gazelles, specific grasses for cats, soft leaves for sacred ibis. In more elite homes, pet caretakers kept journals of each animal's eating habits, moods, and bowel movements. You're not quite there yet, but you are starting to recognize what Tepi's oddly specific braying means. Probably a beet craving. Bathing is another issue. Not because she hates water, she tolerates it, but because she refuses to stay still during the process. You try tying her to a stake. She unties herself. You try tempting her with food. She knocks over the wash basin. Eventually, you discover that gently singing during her baths seems to lull her into staying still. You try a different melody each time. Her favorite seems to be a lullaby your mother once sang when you were small. One afternoon. You catch an elder watching you as you hum and rinse sand from Tepi's flanks. He nods and says, "She chose well. Your days now have a rhythm. Morning walks, midday shade naps, evening feeding rituals. You clean her hooves every few days using warm water and a reed cloth. You even learn how to gently wrap the soft part of her horns in oiled linen to prevent cracking. Of course, she still gets into trouble. She once knocked over a priest's jug of blessed water. Another time, she stole an offering loaf meant for the god Knum. You tried to return it, but the soggy remnants weren't exactly fit for divine consumption. And then there's etiquette. Turns out, not everyone thinks a gazelle should be allowed into indoor spaces, especially the granary, or the bathhouse, or the village council tent. But somehow she always slips in, quietly, gracefully, and then acts shocked that anyone would object, like she didn't pick the lock with her face. One day, your cousin tries to make a point by offering her a piece of raw onion. Knowing she hates it, Tepi accepts it, stares your cousin dead in the eye, and drops it in his sandal. It's the talk of the village for a week. Still, you can't help noticing how everyone has grown used to her presence. They no longer react with surprise when she enters a room. They pause, let her pass. Someone even referred to her as the silent one. You'd laugh if it weren't true. And it's not just your village. Word travels. A man from the neighboring town shows up one day with questions about gazelle care. He's inherited one, apparently, from a relative in Memphis. "It keeps chewing on my scrolls," he says. "Is that normal?" You nod solemnly. Very. You learn there were ancient manuals, papyrus scrolls dedicated to animal behavior. Not many survive, but those that do mention everything from falcon breeding to oxen grooming. And yes, in the margins there are notes on gazelles. Small entries, but present. Will drink sweet wine, but only if warmed. May panic at loud flutes. Historians still dispute how widespread such documents were. Some claim they were elite-only, temple-restricted. Others believe they circulated informally, passed from hand to hand among those who needed them, scribes, servants, caretakers. You like to think that even in ancient times, someone scribbled "prefers soft pillows" next to a sketch of a snoozing gazelle. Tepi has her own preferences now. She likes the mat near the back wall, where the sun hits just right in the morning. She naps with her legs tucked under her like folded silk. She refuses to eat when guests are watching. And she absolutely will not enter a room that smells of roasted onions. You respect these rules. Mostly point one evening, she refuses to sleep inside. You follow her out, worried, only to find her standing beneath the stars, unmoving. You sit beside her, and for a long moment nothing happens. Then a breeze lifts the hem of your tunic, cool and kind. You look up. The stars are unusually bright. Tepi exhales deeply, a sound so soft you almost miss it. You don't need to say anything. She's already said it all. You don't know how long she's been lying there before you notice. Tepi is stretched out in the shade near the wall, eyes closed, belly still. At first, you think she's just napping. She does that often, usually with dramatic flair. But something's different. You kneel beside her, whisper her name. She doesn't flick her ears. Your breath catches. You call her again gently, then louder. She blinks, slowly. Her head lifts just an inch, then drops again like a sack of feathers. Her sides rise and fall with effort. That soft rhythm that once lulled you to sleep now feels terrifyingly faint. You run for help. The healer is an older woman with hands like river roots, knotted and knowing. She doesn't ask questions, just follows you with her satchel of herbs and quiet urgency. She kneels beside Tepi, presses 2 fingers to the animal's side, and closes her eyes. She's old, the healer says finally. Not by years, perhaps, but by wear. She's lived fully. You feel like a child again. The words don't make sense. You fed her mint this morning. She stole your fig 2 nights ago. She was fine. Sometimes, the healer says, they give us everything quickly, in short bursts. Their presence is a whole life, compacted. The next few days blur. You keep her in the cool part of the house. People bring water, soft cloth, dried herbs. Someone even leaves a little prayer amulet by the door. The temple priest visits, says a blessing, brings oil. Tepi barely stirs. You whisper to her, stories, jokes, that awful chant your neighbor always sings off-key. She doesn't move, but once, just once, you swear she twitches her nose at the punchline. Historians rarely mention pet grief in ancient Egypt, but it had to exist. There are 2 murals that show animals lying beside the deceased. Inscriptions that list them by name. Offerings placed in animal-shaped jars. You read about a tomb in Thebes where a gazelle skeleton was found curled beside its owner's remains, wrapped in linen. Like a child. One theory says certain pets were mummified not just for company in the afterlife, but to guide the soul, to remind the gods that their owner had once loved something unselfishly. You start to understand. When the end comes, it is not loud. You wake in the early hours to silence, real silence. Not the absence of noise, but the presence of stillness. You know before you look. She lies curled in her favorite spot, hooves tucked neatly, the blue bead necklace still tied around her slender neck. Her eyes are closed. Her face is peaceful. You weep, but quietly. Not because you want to be strong, but because the moment feels sacred, and grief feels like a guest you don't want to frighten away. Your family helps prepare her. You wash her with cool water, the same way you did on festival days. You sing softly just like during her baths. A low, drifting tune. Others join. A neighbor offers fresh linen. Someone else brings lotus petals. The healer arrives with a small pot of sacred oil. She anoints Tepi's brow, her hooves, her side. You dig the grave yourself. Not far from the house, near the acacia tree she used to nap under. The earth is soft, the shade gentle. You line the space with woven reeds and a little cloth. You place the garland she wore at the festival beside her. And finally, you lay her down. Before covering her, you tuck in one last thing, your scroll. The one you started when she first arrived. You rip out the first page and keep it. The rest you leave with her. She was, after all, the subject. Some say animals don't pass through the same gates in the afterlife, that they return to the land, the water, the wind. Others say they walk with you, unseen, until you're ready to join them. You hope it's both. That night, your dreams are soft and silent. You wake with the feeling that someone just left the room. A flicker of movement, a whisper of hooves. You step outside. The air is cool. The stars are steady. And in the dust by your door, just briefly, you think you see two tiny hoof prints, pointed east. The first few days without Tepi are strange in the way missing sound is strange. Like waking up and realizing the birds aren't singing. Like walking and not hearing your own footsteps. You still reach for the mint leaves in the morning. Still check the door before stepping out, half expecting her to be blocking it. Ready for the day. Your mat feels too big. The air too still. Grief, you discover, is quiet work. It doesn't arrive with screams or speeches. It's in the empty corners, the unchewed dates, the sound of your voice when there's no one to share your story with. But something unexpected begins to happen. People visit. Not to offer condolences, at least not formally. They come to share their stories. A boy brings a worn, scratched amulet. She let me touch her nose once, he says proudly. No other animal ever let me. He leaves the amulet at your doorstep. A merchant, back from a journey north, tells you about a marketplace where trained dancers once moved in sync with temple animals. Yes, including gazelles. He says Tepi would have put them all to shame. Your cousin shyly admits she used to leave fig peels in your courtyard just to see if Tepi would find them. She always did. Your grandmother places a folded piece of linen in your hand. Inside is a charm stitched with a single glyph. Nefer. Beautiful. She reminded me of my own gazelle, she says. When I was a girl, she slept beside my brother's sandals. You didn't know she ever had one. And slowly, gently, Tepi becomes not just your story, but the village's. People remember her in their own ways. They speak of her as they would a person. A quiet one, yes, but someone present in their lives. It's not just your village either. A passing scribe, hearing your story, stays for 2 nights. He writes as you speak, capturing details on a fresh roll of papyrus. He draws her from memory, based on your scroll and others' descriptions. A flick of the ear here, a soft eye there. She takes shape again. Line by line. He tells you gazelles were once depicted in love poems. That their grace was used to describe the beloved. Your steps are like hers, light across the sand. In tomb art, gazelles often flank couples or rest near offerings. Not as servants, but as emblems of serenity, of devotion. And there's another thing. The scribe reads to you a short passage from a little-known funerary text, once reserved for nobles but later adapted for those of great spirit. It says, "To the soul who walked beside the graceful one, the path shall be even. For those who gave care to the calm-eyed, the gates shall open with ease, because peace follows peace." Historians still question the authenticity of that passage. Some call it a later addition, a scribal flourish. Others insist it reflects a shift in belief, where tending animals wasn't just kindness, but virtue. You like that theory. You ask the scribe if he'll include Tepi in his manuscript. He smiles. She's already there. The next time you walk the Nile's edge, alone, you carry no tether. Just a bundle of mint and a soft reed flute. You stop where you used to rest together and sit quietly. And this is where the real surprise comes. A shape emerges from the reeds. Not Tepi. Not even a gazelle technically. It's younger, slighter. Its horns only just forming. It eyes you cautiously. You freeze. Don't reach. Don't speak. It steps forward, sniffs the mint, then bolts away like a ribbon in wind. But something stays in you after that. A feeling, a whisper. She's not gone. Not really. Later that evening, you hang the blue bead necklace above your door, just in case another wandering soul ever finds its way home. Life eventually finds its way back into routine, though nothing feels quite the same. You wake, you work, you walk, but there's an echo in everything now. A kind of softness where the edges used to be sharp. The kind you only get after loving something you can't explain and then letting it go. You start helping out more at the temple, not because you've suddenly found your spiritual calling, but because the quiet inside helps you think. You sweep, you carry offerings, you restock the oil bowls, and sometimes you linger in the shaded corners, where the incense curls like whispers point one afternoon. While organizing a stack of offerings near the altar, you find a sealed clay jar, labeled in faded ink, from Nubia, for royal menagerie. You glance around. No one notices. You open it. Inside, feathers. Not just any feathers, bright, iridescent things, likely from exotic birds. But underneath, buried near the bottom, are hooves. Small, polished, still faintly scented with herbal oils. Gazelle hooves. You're told later by the high priest that they were gifts, tokens sent with live animals traded from the south. Monkeys, birds, and yes, gazelles, sent up the Nile as tributes to pharaohs and nobles. Some arrived alive. Others, like this, arrived as parts, preserved and perfumed. They were valuable, he says simply. Symbols of grace, foreign beauty, divine order. You learn that the exotic animal trade was once a booming part of diplomatic life. Kingdoms exchanged creatures like letters, each one a message. Look at what our lands can birth. Look at what we tame. And gazelles were among the most sought after, not just for their delicacy, but because they didn't always survive the journey, so those that did became precious, almost miraculous. Living proof of endurance. There's a document the temple scribe shares with you. A tribute list from a Nubian envoy to the court of Amenhotep III. It includes 2 monkeys, 3 ostrich plumes, and 1 milk-fed gazelle, bound in silk. Bound in silk. You picture it. A soft-eyed creature, legs trembling, standing aboard a boat somewhere on the Nile, wind in its ears, foreign smells in its nose, unsure of what it's heading into. You wonder if it saw the same moon you see now. Some of these traded gazelles ended up in royal menageries, private zoos for kings. Others were paraded through city streets, shown off like delicate furniture that could move. A few were kept in temple enclosures, tied loosely with gold-threaded rope. Historians still disagree on how exotic these creatures really were. Some argue they were common enough in the southern deserts to be familiar. Others say they became exotic because of how they were treated, reframed, repainted, turned from wild animals into spiritual artifacts. You think the truth might be simpler. Anything treated with care becomes special. Anything that survives hardship becomes sacred. You begin asking around about these trade caravans. A traveler, newly arrived from the Delta, tells you of a museum-like chamber in the northern capital where foreign animals are displayed like statues. Ibex, lions, even a 2-headed lizard from the mountains. He says they even have a gazelle whose fur is combed daily by a servant with golden gloves. You wonder if the servant knows what it's like to walk beside one. To lose one that evening, your neighbor brings you a small package, a faded linen pouch tied with reed string. Inside is a bone whistle carved into the shape of a gazelle. She belonged to my mother, the neighbor says. She used to say that if you blow it gently, it'll bring back memories. Or at least chase off the ones that sting. You try it. The sound is soft, barely there, a half note, a breath. And just for a second, you swear you see movement in the far edge of the courtyard. Nothing distinct, just the impression of a shape slim and fleeting. A flick of ears, a blink, then it's gone. But that's enough. You begin to notice how many stories there are about gazelles now, old ones, new ones, and those that live somewhere in between fact and fable. People seem to be telling them more, as if remembering Tepe opened a kind of floodgate. One tale starts to circulate about a gazelle that once escaped from the temple and ran through the market square, leaping over baskets of figs and weaving between startled donkeys. When the priests finally caught up, they found it curled beside a blind boy who claimed it whispered his mother's name. No one could prove it happened, but the story clings like incense to every retelling. Another legend involves a gazelle that walked into a courtroom during a land dispute. It stopped in front of the judge, stamped its hoof twice, then left. The case was dismissed immediately. Reason: the gods have spoken. Again, no records, just nods, knowing looks. People embellish, of course. You hear of gazelles that vanish into smoke, gazelles who never leave footprints, gazelles who cry when their owners die. You don't mind. In fact, you begin to collect the stories. You carve small marks into a wooden board, one line for each tale told. You've nearly filled the frame. And then one day, an elder pulls you aside. "You've heard the old riddle?" he asks. "You haven't." He recites it. "What runs without chase, weeps without pain, and dies without sound?" The answer, of course, is a gazelle. But he smiles anyway, as if you pass some test just by listening. You start visiting travelers when they pass through. Traders from the Red Sea, hunters from the Western Desert. You ask them not about gold or maps or politics, just stories about animals. Especially gazelles. One man from Elephantine tells you a peculiar one. A king once fed his pet gazelle fermented dates. It danced, apparently, for 3 hours, then passed out on the governor's feet. The governor took it as a blessing and raised the tax on imported wine. Another traveler swears he once saw a gazelle that could recognize its own reflection. It stared into a polished copper mirror and refused to leave. Maybe it thought it found a mate, he says. Or maybe it just knew something we don't. Some stories are too strange to even question. A papyrus fragment that survives from the Middle Kingdom mentions a gazelle with silver blood. Most scholars dismiss it as poetic exaggeration. Others argue it refers to a rare pigment used in ceremonial art, derived from crushed shells and minerals. But a very fringe theory? That certain animals were thought to bleed differently when touched by gods. Historians still debate whether these myths served a deeper purpose. Were they metaphor, moral lessons, spiritual metaphors? Or were they just bedtime stories passed around like warm bread? Meant to comfort, not clarify. You begin to think the answer is yes. To all of it. One afternoon, you sit beside a group of children as a traveler tells the story of the gazelle who waited. It goes something like this. Long ago, a storm scattered a caravan in the desert. Everyone ran, but one man stayed behind, injured. As the winds howled, he saw a gazelle standing just beyond the dunes. She never moved, never blinked, just stood there like a memory. When he crawled toward her, she walked a few paces, then stopped. She led him to a spring, saved his life. He built a shrine where he saw her last. Still there, they say. You look around. Every child is silent. One leans against your shoulder. Another holds her breath. You smile. And later that night, as you watch the stars shimmer in the black bowl of the sky, you think about the stories. Somewhere, out in the dunes, a gazelle-shaped shadow might still be watching someone. Or nothing at all. Just standing there, for the sake of balance. Because that's what gazelles do. You wake before the sun rises. The air is cool and your mat feels too large again. You sit in the doorway and watch the pale light spread across the courtyard, illuminating the spot where Tepi used to stretch in the mornings. You don't cry. Not anymore. But you still feel it. A softness behind the ribs. A kind of quiet you carry around like a folded cloth tucked in your tunic. That morning, the village priest stops by your home with a request. There's a scholar visiting from the library of On. He's studying animal symbolism. I told him about you. You're flattered and mildly panicked. The scholar is kind, soft-spoken, all eyebrows and ink-stained fingers. He listens carefully as you recount everything, from your first days with Tepi, to her festival appearance, to her passing. He nods often, occasionally scribbling something in his scroll. Then he asks the question, why do you think Egyptians truly kept gazelles? You pause. It's not a question with a simple answer. You could say companionship, but that's not it, not entirely. Not like a dog or cat. You could say status, but Tepi chewed sandal straps and pooped during rituals, so you tell him the truth. Because they make us slow down. He smiles. That's new. You explain how people moved differently around her. How silence became part of the conversation. How watching her just exist made everyone a little softer. A little quieter. A little more here. Historians still argue, he says. whether animals like gazelles were truly spiritual companions or just fashionable trends. You nod. You've read those scrolls. You've heard the temple debates. One theory says gazelles were stand-ins for fertility goddesses. Another claims they represented fleeting beauty, life's shortness made visible. A third says they were simply imported luxuries like ebony or incense. But you know better. They were all those things, and none. Symbols and friends. Decorations and teachers. Silence in hoofed form. The scholar stays 3 nights. Each evening, he joins you in the courtyard to share stories. On the last night, he shows you something. A painted shard. Broken pottery from a tomb near Saqqara. On it, a sketch of a youth and a gazelle. The figure's hand rests gently on the gazelle's neck. There are no words, no labels, just that image. He gives it to you. To keep, he says. She would have liked it. After he leaves, you hold the shard in your hands for a long time. It's rough but familiar, like it belongs in your home, like she does. Later that week, a new debate stirs in the temple. One priest argues that gazelles were connected to the goddess Anuket, patroness of the Nile's cataracts. Another counters that they were sacred only in certain nomes, regional symbols, not universal ones. You sit through the discussion quietly, sipping tamarind juice, not arguing. Because you know the truth. You've seen it, lived it, buried it, remembered it. They still don't agree. They may never agree. And somehow that feels right, because Tepi never needed agreement. She only needed space. You find yourself walking more these days. Not because you're going anywhere specific, but because the world looks different now. Slower, like it's trying to speak in soft hoofbeats and breezes. You start to notice things. The way reeds sway in patterns, the way cats pause before pouncing, the way the sun bends over the water like it's leaning in to listen. You revisit the acacia tree often, the one where you laid her to rest. You don't bring offerings, just presence. A sit, a breath. Sometimes, a song under your breath that isn't quite sad anymore. Today, though, the Nile is rising. The village is bustling in its usual panic meets ritual. Clay embankments are being reinforced, goats are loudly objecting to being moved, and someone keeps yelling about a missing ladder like it's the most important thing in the kingdom. The floods always come. That's how things work. The river rises, the land drowns and drinks at the same time, and then everything grows again. That's the deal. You've lived through this before. But this time you feel something new. A tug. A need to say goodbye, properly, before the water touches where she rests, so you go. The tree is still there, leaves dancing like green fire. The air smells like wet clay and the ghost of lotus blooms. You kneel beside the earth you once dug with shaking hands. It's dry for now, but you can hear the river, whispering closer. You speak softly. No prayers, just words. Thank you, you say, for staying. You leave nothing behind. No token, no garland. Just your breath and the memory of fur brushing your leg under starlight. As you walk back, you hear laughter. Children splashing in shallow puddles, pretending to be crocodiles. Someone's flute plays a melody you recognize. It's the one you used to hum during Tepi's baths. You smile. Not wide, just enough. The water comes the next morning. Slow at first, then all at once. Fields disappear. Roads change shape. The acacia tree holds its place for a time, then leans slightly, as if bowing. And just before the roots are swallowed, you think you see a shape at its base. Not clear, not solid, just a flicker. Slender legs, soft curve of a back, ears poised. Maybe it's a trick of the light. Maybe it's her. Doesn't matter. Because in that moment, everything slows. The flood, the breath, the grief. You feel no pain, only a strange kind of peace, like something has folded closed gently. And now, your body relaxes, your shoulders soften, your thoughts drift. The stories have all been told. She is still with you, and you? You're home. The Nile recedes, the fields begin to breathe again. Green pushes through the silt, slow and soft. The animals return, cautious at first, then confident. The world stretches, yawns, and settles. Your village mends its paths, rebuilds its walkways, restitches what was pulled apart. There's no rush, no race, just the slow rhythm of survival wrapped in familiarity. And you walk the same roads with different eyes. You see her, sometimes not in form, but in feeling, in the hush before the sunrise, in the way a shadow curves under a fig tree, in the breeze that lifts your tunic just as you think of her at night. You sit under stars that shimmer like whispered names. You hum a lullaby without knowing why. Maybe she hums it back, maybe not. It's enough to feel the air shift. Your hand rests on the bead above your door. Still there, still blue, still hers, and now your breath deepens. Let your eyelids grow heavy. Let the stories blur into dreams. There's no more walking to do tonight. Only resting, only remembering, only being. She walks just ahead of you, quiet as a whisper, and all you have to do is follow.